Today we have the privilege of welcoming celebrated author Sue Tidwell, a woman whose journey into the heart of Africa has shattered stereotypes and exposed the real story behind hunting and conservation. Brace yourself, because what you're about to hear isn't just controversial, it's shocking. Why would a non-hunter be defending hunting as a solution to save Africa's most iconic species? And how does taking an animal's life actually preserve entire ecosystems? This is the truth that nobody's talking about. Until now. Welcome to the Salt Lick Worldwide Podcast. It's time to uncover the untold.
Welcome to the Salt Lick Worldwide Podcast. Today we have an incredible special guest joining us, someone who brings a truly unique perspective to the world of hunting and conservation. Sue Tidwell, the author of Cries of the Savannah, is without a doubt one of the most fascinating and distinctive voices we've ever had on the podcast. Her ability to blend personal adventure with the complexities of wildlife conservation set her apart. Sue's memoir takes readers on a remarkable journey through Africa, exploring not only her experiences on safari, but also often broader versions and misunderstood roles that hunting plays in conservation. She's here to share those stories and dig into some tough, thought-provoking topics. So without further ado, let's welcome Sue Tidwell to the Salt Lick Worldwide Podcast. Hi, Sue.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You know, you and I have been talking for a while now. And I'm glad we could finally make time. Unfortunately, for me, you were in Africa enjoying yourself.
Yes, I was for 5 weeks. I was there. It was amazing. I was there for 5 weeks. I just got back.
And based on what I can see on social media, it looks like you had a fantastic time.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Yeah, in so many ways. But yeah, because I went this time. It was a little different for me. I met a friend of mine in South Africa who I actually met on Instagram, believe it or not, through the book and through everything and contacts, and she's real conservation minded. So I spent 2.5 weeks in South Africa, Zululand, doing non-hunting stuff and seeing wildlife in a whole different way. And then I met my husband in Zimbabwe for another hunt. So I was there 2.5 weeks. So I kind of got both sides of things this time.
Well, nice. You got both sides of both perspectives for sure.
Exactly.
Well, nice. So let's start off. So if you could, can you tell our listeners about your background and what initially sparked your interest in writing about hunting and conservation?
Well, I grew up in a hunting family in rural Pennsylvania. You know, my brothers were all deer hunters, turkey hunters, and so I grew up eating meat. I myself was never a hunter. I was fine with having it on my plate, but I didn't want to be the one out there shooting it. So, but it wasn't, and I ended up marrying a hunter, and we live in rural Idaho, and my husband's dream was always to hunt in Africa. It wasn't until Africa, hunting wildlife in Africa, that I had put those animals on a pedestal. Like a lot of people in America, we think differently of African wildlife. So, suddenly I was questioning things like, how could hunting a zebra be conservation? How can hunting a leopard or a lion be conservation? It really made me think. And luckily, because I know hunters, they're my family, they're my friends, I trusted hunters enough to go there and explore it with Rick, even though I was scared to death because he wanted to live in a tent. He wanted to be in a tent with lions roaring outside and black mambas, everywhere. And I had read Peter Capstick's Death in the Long Grass, and so that's all I had in my mind was the grisly deaths of so many ways. So I was scared to death of that part, but I wanted to experience Africa. So I put on my big girl panties, as I like to say, and I packed a bag and joined Rick. And I at least did go there with even though I questioned a lot of things, I did go there with an open mind. And by the time I was done with the safari, I became so close to the people there. We had 21 Tanzanians taking care of us and with us all the day. And it was just, I just fell in love with the people, and I learned so much about why conservation or why well-managed hunting or regular hunting is so important to the people of Africa and therefore the wildlife itself, because they're tied together. You can't have good wildlife conservations if you don't have the people also benefiting from wildlife that are in the area. So anyway, and as I was there and became so passionate about understanding, as I learned and I became passionate about understanding why hunting was so important to these people that I fell in love with, basically, I realized that if I questioned it, there were so many other people out there that questioned it. So I made a promise to our game scout. We had a female game scout, which was pretty cool. and we became good friends. And I made her a promise before leaving that I would try to help people like me understand why hunting is so important. So that promise is what evolved into Cries of the Savannah. I really had no intention when I went there writing a book. Luckily, I took good notes and I wrote everything down. And then Lillian is, she was 23 at the time, so she had a brain like sharp as a tack. So anytime I was writing the book, I could, through the internet, I could ask her questions and she could refresh my memory or then, help me out with the name of a river or something, for instance. But anyway, that's kind of how it started.
Well, that was a much longer explanation than I figured we were going to get. You just breezed through like the first 3 questions of the podcast right off the bat.
Sorry.
I couldn't even lead into the next one. That's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on, and that's I guess the big question. That's what I was going to ask, is what inspired you to write Cries of the Savannah? But you pretty much just summed that up, perfectly.
When I made that promise to Lillian, I had no idea what I was really promising and how I was going to do it. But I came home and I tried some other things, and, life kept me busy for a few years. And then finally, our life changed a little bit. We sold our business and had to do some different stuff. My husband took a different job. And anyway, finally that I had the time, and my friends had been telling me that I should write a book for years, because I always write these long adventure-filled Christmas letters. And they're like, Sue, you need to write this. You need to write a book. And I was like, who wants to listen to what I have to say if you don't know me? Well, Tanzania changed that. I kind of felt like suddenly I had something important to say and something that people needed to hear or might want to hear. So I finally did it. I sat down and started writing, and that's how it's began.
And do you think, you mentioned growing up in part of rural America, having a family that hunted. Do you think that early upbringing and those experiences, it helped writing Cries of the Savannah?
Oh, absolutely, because I have so much history and background to go on. And I didn't have, I knew the hunting world in that sense because I grew up among hunters. I knew that they're not these evil people that a lot of people want to portray them as. They're my dad, my brothers, my friends. They're hardworking, ethical. I mean, so yeah, it definitely affected my stance on it for sure.
Yeah, and then for our listeners who may not be familiar with your work, and I don't know how they can't be at this point in time. I think that if once anybody goes to Africa, they've heard your name now. Especially, it's been within the last several years, 5 or 6 years. Everybody knows who you are, and you're kind of a person, a big personality, hard to miss. I feel like at all the events, everybody, your books are always there, and you're doing signings and things. But for our listeners that aren't sure, can you just give a brief overview about exactly what is Cries of the Savannah and what can they expect from the book?
Well, first and foremost, Cries of the Savannah is a grand adventure. I want to take people to Africa and let them feel like they were there for the first time. I want them to fall in love with Africa and its people and its wildlife like I did. And then as I embed people into the adventure, then I kind of weave in conservation as I learned it. I try not to overwhelm people with what I learned all at once, and like I said, I learned this stuff, and then I came home when I wrote the book, and I backed it up with research to make sure, I just didn't blindly believe everything I was told. So I backed it up with non-hunting research from biologists and non-hunting entities. I didn't use hunting sources, and because I thought that was important. But basically, it's an adventure that weaves in conservation in little bits as I learned it myself. And so, that's basically what it is. And I just want people to fall in love with Africa and go to Africa.
So that's perfect. And I think you had a home run with the book. I really do. And then, so what was the most challenging part about writing the book?
Everything.
Story or moment that was particularly difficult to convey to the reader?
Well, yeah, explaining how you feel when an animal is killed or harvested, putting that into words, because there's so many there, and the celebration. I don't want to give too much away about, the leopard. I mean, there's certain things that are just so hard to put into words, but I tried. So, that was the hard part. Harder than actually, and I'm not a writer who just sits down and goes and is done. I really have to think about it. It takes me, I might write it and rewrite it just to really tweak it to get it to where it's entertaining enough and where it tells the story in the right way I want to portray it. So I just can't whip out a bunch of books a year like some of these authors. And like I said, this was all new to me, so I had to learn everything as I went.
Yeah, right before you jumped on, we were just talking about Hemingway, and I was, Paul and I, everybody, I think, especially once you get a passion for Africa, you're going to read Hemingway at some point in time. You're going to read Rourke at some point in time. You may even find authors like Wilbur Smith at a point in time. But, we talked about it, and it took me 2 years to read Green Hills of Africa. It was just so hard for me to get through. And then when I picked up Rourke, Horn of the Hunter, it was just bang, bang, bang. I couldn't put it down. But, so I think Hemingway's obviously tough to read. I feel like he is anyway, especially for me. Paul seemed to breeze through it with no problem. I don't think but if he had...
I didn't say I liked it. I just said I read it.
But, yours is like, your book is easy to read, right? It's fun. You don't want to put it down. You want to keep turning the pages. And, if you're sitting there reading it at night, like, I'll go ahead and get another chapter out tonight, before I go to bed kind of thing. And is that just part of you, did you decide ahead of time, hey, I really need to make this fun because it is there is some controversy associated with, with hunting and I need to make it fun to reach a broader audience? Was that kind of the thought?
Well, luckily, that's instinctively how I write anyway. Like in all my adventure-filled Christmas letters, it's kind of like that. I take people on these grand adventures with me on these Christmas letters. But I instinctively knew, too, because I was gearing the book towards non-hunters, really, is who I was wanting to help find the book, basically. I knew that I couldn't just be like pound in for conservation. I knew that I had to, I guess instinctually, I knew I had to make it this adventure, and I wanted people to fall in love with people of Africa like I did. That's why you learn so much about the people that I came to love, because if people care about them, then they will care about Africa, and they will care about what happens to them, and then they will understand better, because that's such a big part of the story. That's such a big part of the equation, is the people of Africa. And so I guess I just instinctually knew that I wanted people, I really just wanted people to experience what I felt, that wonder, that amazement, that camaraderie I felt with the people, that the feelings of affection I felt for them and everything. So I guess I just tried to convey all that.
Well, and I think you did a wonderful job. And as a side note, just as a point of reference, it was unique. I brought, fortunately, I'm in a position where I get to hunt Africa every year. Not many people can do that, so I'm definitely fortunate and blessed to be able to do that. But just a funny segue is I took a group this year, and Paul was on that first group that we took, so it was his first time, and he's been hearing us talk about it for years. So obviously there was some excitement there. But I was sitting in Africa Sky Guest Lodge, kind of waiting for the group, and they've got that bookshelf right next to the fireplace. And I walk over there, and whose book do I see? Cries of the Savannah on the bookshelf.
Oh, awesome!
and not only that, so the first group I took, we went to Hunter's Hill in the East Cape, and also Greg and Simon have a big bookshelf there, kind of next to the bar lounge area. And I'm just kind of thumbing through there, and what book do I see? Cries of the Savannah is also on the shelf there. So. I think it's, just become one of those things where if you go to camp, like this is kind of, one of the books you should pick up and read. So it's definitely, you definitely bounded across the ocean for sure, because everybody's got your book on the shelf now.
Well, good. That's good to hear. Because the good thing about the book is, even though I didn't gear it towards hunters, luckily hunters really enjoy the book. I guess there's enough adventure in it, enough of, and from what some seasoned African hunters tell me is that they feel like they're there again for the first time. It allows them to relive that wonder of that first time in Africa. But the main goal about is hunters enjoying it is that then they pass it on to people that don't understand hunting. They pass it on to wives or cousins or family members or parents. And that's my whole goal with a book. Enjoy the book, fall in love with Africa, and then pass it on to somebody who doesn't quite get it, who doesn't understand the complexities of conservation and why hunting and phototourism are both a part of the equation.
Yeah, and you just made a good point. I want to move over to Paul a little bit. So, like Sue just mentioned, Paul, when you read the book, you kind of relive your first trip to Africa. So both of these things, you're right in the middle of the book right now, and you just came back from your first trip to Africa. I mean, does it resonate with you the same way?
Yes, yeah. I mean, like I was mentioning before, we actually started recording. I'm currently listening to the audio side, and if you guys get a chance to listen to the audio side, she superimposes the sounds, right? And where we were staying at Hunter's Hill, we had lions at night there, and and she starts talking about and describing it. So you start picturing that. Then in the audio version, the lions she actually, like I said, superimposes. So yeah, it's a total flashback. And then, like you said, the people and watching them, how hard the support staff works and takes care of you to everything. Yeah. So yeah, it's very easy. And I'm like 5 months reviewed. So yeah, it's just so easy to jump back into like vivid memories of, the walking, the talking with the locals and everything involved. So, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think you hit a home run with Paul too, by the way, Sue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
He's normally a tough critic, but So in your book, you discuss the balance between hunting and conservation. And obviously, on our channel with the podcast, with everything we do, we preach conservation all the time. But you handle it a different way than we do. Can you kind of elaborate on why you believe that balance is essential?
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, because hunters protect habitat totally different than what ecotourism does. We need both. Both are very important to Africa. But most phototourists do not want to go the places that hunters go. A lot of hunting places there's not as many animals. The terrain is tough. The infrastructure is not there. There's tsetse flies, as you know from the book. I mean, there's all these things that are not attractive to general tourists, or they're too far away. Like we had to get a bush plane and fly another 2.5 hours to get to where we were at. Most people want to land and then they want to drive to this resort for a couple of days, and they want to drive to this national park, then they want to drive to this national park. Hunters are willing to go very remote, stay there 2 weeks, and sleep on a bed of nails if they have to, even if there's only one animal there, if it's the animal they're pursuing. So it's so important. And the other thing, so it makes habitat important. And that is the thing that hunting does more than anything else, is makes habitat valuable. And by making habitat valuable, it doesn't get turned into croplands or pastures or pineapple fields. So that's the main thing it does is protect habitat. And also the hunting concessions, every country is a little different, as you know, but like in Tanzania, for instance, the hunting concessions border the national parks. So that is a line of defense against poaching for those parks. And it also is an overflow because there's only so many animals can live in a certain area. So as the park's animals expand, they can expand into these hunting areas and then, eventually possibly get hunted. But the main thing, too, is just that it's a line of protection against poachers. You have all these hunting concessions with all these vehicles and game scouts and professional hunters, all these people traversing this country all day long, and it deters poaching. So I think that's what I mean. Like we need both, but one is not exclusive of the other. We can't do without. We don't want to get rid of, because phototourism is good at protecting certain areas, and hunting tourism is good at protecting certain areas. So it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, and I think there can certainly there's room for a happy medium of both too. It doesn't have to. We don't have to draw a line in the sand, and I think that's the problem hunters make a lot of times is we're guilty of maybe judging too quickly the other side of the coin rather than trying to understand what that person's thinking and have a civil conversation with them. And that's one thing we try to stress on our show is that, hey, it's okay if you feel that way. Tell me why, and I'll tell you why I feel this way. And then, we'll either agree or we won't, but we'll be on the same page and we can have the conversation. I think, yelling and screaming and hollering is not going to fix it, right? But if people can have educated conversations and explain it the way you do, I think we'd be a lot better off.
And I think most people are in the middle, and most people, anyone that has common sense, when they really hear this stuff told to them in the way that, we're talking now, they get it. I mean, they totally get it. I mean, I was on a Zoom call last night for 2 hours with a book club, and it was a bunch of women, and a couple of them were anti-hunters, and they admitted it because I asked them in turn. I said, so that means this book club only wrote fiction books, but they made an exception for my book because one of the women knew me. So anyway, but she said it totally changed her opinion. And she used to think her neighbor, who was a trophy hunter in Africa, was evil. She said, she's totally changed her opinion of him. She's totally changed her thing because at least and even though she admitted she was an anti-hunter, she had common sense and was able to listen and understand. And she just said she came away with a whole different concept. So I think most people are like that. I mean, you're always going to have that 5% that are not, it doesn't matter what you say. They're not going to open their minds to listen or to understand. You got to take emotion out of it. But there's a large majority we can reach.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, too. There's that emotional detachment that you have to be able to say, okay, I got to take emotion out of it, and we need to think about it from a scientific approach. And a lot of people have a hard time doing that.
It's hard. It's hard to do that. I'm a very emotional person. I mean, it's very hard to do that, but yet I see the other side of it. I know how important it is.
Yeah, so but with that same kind of thought process and the conservation, and then so conservation and advocacy. So what do you think they're the biggest? So you had some non-hunters in the group last night. So what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about hunting and conservation that you encounter?
Well, first of all, a lot of people don't understand, especially about Africa, that the meat is all used. They have no idea. They think that, I don't know, they think to take the head off and leave everything on the ground. Even hunters believe that. That was my biggest thing that I learned when I talked to domestic hunters. A lot of them turned their nose up at safari hunting because they just didn't understand it. So that was my biggest surprise, actually. But yeah, a lot of people, they don't understand that the meat is all used. They don't understand how by giving wildlife a value over there, it makes these people more willing to live without wildlife. I mean, not everybody wants to live with a lion or a leopard or, elephants in their backyard. I mean, we just came back from Zimbabwe, and my trackers, one lost a brother to an elephant, another lost his uncle to an elephant. I mean, these people live lives that we can't even fathom. So they have a different view of wildlife than we do, so anyway, I think I got distracted there, but what was it?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
So are there, you're going to run into those people, right, that don't understand, and that's a hard nut to crack. I run into it every year, and we preach conservation, and going back to your point, something I heard years ago was the analogy, if it pays, it stays. And, if there's no value to these animals, then the farmers are going to tear down the fences and they're going to farm cattle and sheep because it's more profitable. So by putting a value, whether it's from hunting or from ecotourism, we're sustaining those populations. We can contribute. That money goes back. And the other thing that people don't understand is the giant trickle down effect that happens in Africa with both ecotourism dollars and hunting dollars. And let's talk about that for a second, because you were just in a very remote part of Africa, and certainly there that your dollars spent as an American, they've got to go much further there.
Oh, it's just for instance, just my my game scout. We had a female game scout which is pretty uncommon, but I've been lucky twice now. I've had female game scouts, but anyway, she's a widower. Her husband was killed, and she has 5 kids to take care of. I mean, and then they don't always just take care of their kids. It's usually the extended family, the mothers and the aunties, and it's just these extended families that depend on that income. And then of course you're buying supplies, and you're buying groceries, and you're getting a plane ticket. We had to fly a bush plane to where we went, so now you have a pilot hired, and then you're supporting his family, and it's just this trickle down thing. The money goes so far. And the main thing about hunting tourism is that it gets dispersed far and wide. Like photo tourism is it's by the Serengeti, it's by the Ngorongoro crater. It's in those pockets.
It's
in those pocket areas. And a lot of times they don't want to hire people who can't speak English, for instance. Hunting world is totally different than that. First of all, the money is dispersed far and wide to the remotest areas you can imagine. It doesn't matter so much that they can't speak English. it's nice when they can speak a little bit, because I was lucky this time. Most of mine could speak some English, but I also learned Shauna and stuff while I was there. But anyway, they can communicate they can have their jobs without having to speak English. And, and that's a requirement of a lot of hunting. Where we were at, they required to hire the local people. I mean, that was part of the requirement of getting a hunting concession. And they have to hire so many. So, and then they also have to do anti-hunting or anti-poaching patrols and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stipulations that go into getting a hunting concession.
Yeah, no, a ton. And we've seen, going back to kind of that trickle-down conversation, I try every year when I take groups over to, I know this year we went to Sparrows and Tarka, and we went and visited the orphanages, and we walked through, and the outfitters that we hunt with, they all, donate and give back. And it's not just them, it's the local farmers too. And in talking to the we'll call her the director, for a lack of a better term right now, without those, without people coming and hunting, without those farmers, they could not support those organizations. They couldn't feed those kids. They couldn't clothe those kids. So it's one thing to talk about it, right? But when you go show somebody, and I guess that's the point I'm getting at. So I took a big group with me and I showed them firsthand, like, listen, this is what we're doing. We loaded down the bakkies with meat, and we brought meat, and it was very heartfelt, and the kids sang, and they got to walk through the facility. They saw, what poverty looks like. And we talked about the backgrounds of some of these children, what they come from. And because of the local farmers, to include game farmers too. And, they're able to at least give these kids a chance at a decent life. And I know one thing that kind of stuck out for us on this trip. So I took a big group there, and I ended up right back at Sparrows like 3 days later, because when we were talking to the director, she was kind of walking us through, and we realized she had it was 37 or 40 kids or something currently, and they were at max capacity. And she walked us in kind of the laundry area, and there was a single, almost efficiency style washing machine that they used for the entirety of the facility. And I didn't really think much about it at the time. And we got back in the bakkies and we're driving back, and the guy said, "Hey, did you notice that?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I didn't really pay it much attention." He's like, "Would it be nice for us to, maybe if we could all pitch in and do something and maybe get him a commercial washer?" So I reached out to our outfitter, and they made it happen. And then we all ended up going back the next week and surprising them. And we delivered a washing machine for them. And it was when you, tears of joy coming down people's face, you really feel like you made an impact right then and there. It really, pulls on your heartstrings.
I tell you, I get chills just listening to it, because you have so many experiences like that when you're hunting. And, when you're given that meat, it's one thing to kill meat to put in your own freezer. It's a whole other thing to see that meat being given to people who are very protein deficient and very rarely get meat. It's just a whole different feeling. And, and just like you said, the little things, we always take the Amy Bell blue bags from SCI, you've heard of all those. We always take those full of soccer balls and stuff. And just those little things mean so much to the kids and to the people. And then we go to the local store, like at this last one in Zimbabwe, there was a little tea. And when I say store, I mean yeah, I don't even know what we would call a store, but it just is, the little local area of the village. And we bought a bunch of school supplies there, because that also kept the money there in that village, and, but it just, when you see how appreciative they are of the smallest thing, it just changes you. And here's another thing I just want to give a shout out, or I just want to put this out there. Any one of you guys who are going to Africa, take your SCI and DSC Dell Safari Club bags. Those bags we get? The teachers love them. I mean, it was just, because I took a whole bunch. I had 10 or something here, so I took them along with all the balls, and they were just such a huge hit. Everybody loved. I'm like, geez, most people are just throwing those things away. So anyway, so take your bags and give them out while you're over there. But yeah, it's amazing how you feel and how hunters give to all that, and how presenting food to the people, how it makes you feel.
Yeah, and it crosses boundaries too, and I'll explain this a little bit. So when we were in the Eastern Cape, I was fortunate, like I said, I was in country for 7 weeks this year, and I hunted with 2 different outfitters in the Eastern Cape. I don't know if they're direct competitors for the same business, but they're relatively close to one another. But the cool part about it is this particular orphanage, they both kind of sponsor what goes on there, and one would pull in the gate, and while the other one was pulling out, the next guy would come in, and they're equally doing their part, between. So I was there with Hunters Hill, and Simon brought us, and then the next week we were back with Chris with the Bull Safaris, and Nancy had sent stuff with me from the Bull Safaris, blue bags full of stuff for the kids, and it's just so cool to see, these outfitters actually, and it's not like there's a logbook when you walk in, right? So, I'm always a little apprehensive, like how much of this is pomp and circumstance and how much of this actually goes on when you're not here. So to go into this, it's a gated orphanage, and then, there's pretty good security there, but there's a logbook everybody has to sign, and you're not allowed to bring a camera in unless you have a special exception to do so. And I'm reading through the logbook, and the cool thing I'm seeing is every week those outfitters are there, and it's not just through hunting season, like the off season too. Like I'm going back, so it's not just for show. Like these guys are really doing it. And then I've met a lot of the local farmers too, over the years hunting these areas. And I started recognizing names. I'm like, what is that? Yeah, that's him. And that was his wife and daughter that just pulled out of here right before we got here. So it's very much, it's a cool thing to see. And I go back to the pomp and circumstance. It's not for these people. It's part of the life they live and part of the communities that help support. And it really, like I said, it pulls on your heartstrings when you can see that. And there's some affirmation there too, like, hey, these guys are doing their part when they don't have to, and there's no cameras on and they're still doing it. The least we could do is try to do our little part while we're there. And people don't understand it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of dollars. It's the little stuff. It could be a backpack, it could be a soccer ball, it could be some writing utensils. Anything goes a long way to help these kids out and, help them or put them in a position that they'll have a better life. And I think that's one thing hunters don't get enough credit for. Is we have a tendency to have very big hearts, and there's too many times I think hunters get painted with a broad stroke, and that all of us are bloodthirsty killers, but that's not true. For me, and I don't speak for everybody, but for me, the trigger squeeze on a hunt is fleeting, right? It's microseconds. It's all the memories that I made getting to that point that I'm going to remember, and I don't like to see an animal. I don't want to harm an animal, So when I'm hunting, we strive for, ethical, as quickly as possible, put the animal down and be appreciative of what happened. And, and that's most hunters too. Now, of course, there's bad apples like there are in every, facet of life. But I think for the most part, hunters are good people with big hearts, and they want to help and do the right thing. And I think sometimes, especially from the anti-groups, because of a couple bad apples, the entirety of the industry gets painted that way.
Yeah, and and the bad thing is about, you and I know what is involved in quote, quote, trophy. You know what I mean? And we know the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, the time, the effort, the money, and just the memories behind it. But an anti or even anybody general, when they see that picture, they just see that grin, and they don't understand all the work that went into that and all those, like my husband, we have some animals here. And when I look at that Cape Buffalo, I remember the lion scars. I remember the tsetse flies. I remember, the heat and sweating. And I remember falling in eland guts. I remember all that stuff. But that's what's so hard is, it's a hunter's right to post that stuff. But at the same time, it's so hard because people, the general public, do not understand that.
Well, and this is something that was going to come later, but we're already here, and I think it's important to note. So let's slide over for a second into the social media part of this. So social media can very much be a double-edged sword, right? So with that in mind, do you think social media has helped the industry, or it's done more harm than good?
And let's face it, those anti-hunting groups, not all of them, some of them are just money-hungry, grabbing entities who don't even care about conservation. It's all about the money. And I'm not lumping every one of them into that. But so that's their money ticket. When they see a hunter with that, especially if it's a lion or something, that's their money ticket. It's easy for them to show a cute picture of an animal and get tons of money coming in, or go on the rhino extinction thing, the rhino horn, and get tons of money. But what are they actually doing? What are they actually doing for conservation? Some of them. Now, I'm not lumping all of them in there. But so, yeah, I think in that sense, it's been really bad. But in another sense, I think it's coming around. I really think hunters now are really trying to tell the story. A lot of times now when you see posts, it's not just the grip and grin. It's the, if you read the post, which that's the problem. A lot of people don't read the post. But if you read the post, you'll learn how many days they went after it, and you learn all these other things. So I think hunters are really trying to do better in general. But yeah, and like I get death threats. I get all that stuff. I get that terrible stuff just because I support hunting and I've written a book. But I have also met such amazing people through social media. So it's definitely one of those, double-edged swords.
I think we had a podcast that we shot while we were in country with Doug Cocroft from Splitting Image Taxidermy. And Doug's take was very much similar to yours in that he would rather, when he hunts, he does it for himself, and he would rather share a picture with a friend like, hey, look, on my cell phone kind of thing, rather than post it on social media. And I get that, but I also get that if it's done in a professional way, it's okay. There are some people, and I still see it to this day, and I cringe every time I do. There's this beautiful trophy on the ground, and somebody's posing with it in a way that just makes us all look like retards. And and my thought is, at the same time, what was the PH thinking when he allowed that to happen and said, I really just want can't you just take your belt off and just wear that guy out and teach him what it is, to be respectful of this animal? And, certainly as kids, we're probably, as early hunters and kids, we had to learn that from our parents or our relatives or whoever, we looked up to in hunting. And, these people, I think, I don't know how to fix it, because we're in a world now where social media is such a big part of everybody's life. Everybody's on social media, and even our company on the Salt Lick side of things. I mean, the entirety of what we do is based around social media. So it's very much necessary that we engage and that we continue to post. And unfortunately, controversy is good for business, and we don't shy away from it. Certainly, we like to hit it head on. But people making stupid mistakes and doing stupid things definitely doesn't help, because it takes one person. You could do everything right for 10 years, and you post that one wrong picture, that's the one they're going to use.
Just cringe. I mean, when I see certain things, my heart just sinks, because I think, oh my God, people like you and I and others out there are working so hard to portray the truth of regulated hunting and how important it is to Africa and in general, hunting in general in America too. And then you see something like that and you think, oh, that just gives fuel for the fire for the other side, because it's really upsetting sometimes, because it's tough.
Yeah, we hit, like I said, and it was actually yesterday. I think we had a couple of nasty comments on a video we posted, and I didn't really get into it. I'll respond to every question or every comment that we get, no matter what. But I try to do it in a professional manner, and I try to do it in which I pose a question, because I want that back and forth. And this particular comment was about, I think the commenter didn't think we were hunting ethically because we had to shoot an animal more than once. And my take on it was, well, listen, hunting's not perfect, right? We all strive for an ethical first shot. One shot, kill the animal, it goes down, he doesn't suffer. Unfortunately, that's not the reality of hunting. Sometimes you have to do that. Now, while I can certainly go on there and say, I can cut it so it looks like it's one shot and the animal's down on the ground, and I don't show any of that, but feel like I'm doing a disservice to the people that watch us if I'm not truthful about it, right? So I do. So we've kind of created this environment where I'm going to show everything, and we filmed an entire season of the TV show that's going to air this winter there, and we're starting to cut it right now. Like, I want to show the entirety of it and use it as a learning experience too. Like, hey guys, and I think part of the pushback I get is because it may not paint a great picture of hunters, but I think it's also necessary to get the message across that we can make a mistake, but look what happens at the end and how thankful we are, and how we take that and we learn from that experience. I could have done this better. I could have done that better, and that's kind of the way we approach it. Like I said, we very much preach transparency within the entirety of the hunting industry. And if I can't be transparent with our viewers and followers, then who the hell am I to sit on a podcast and, chat with y'all?
Well, I think it's only fair, to be honest. And then, like you said, every hunter, they'd be lying if they say they didn't make that mistake at least once. But once a hunter makes that mistake, he works so hard to never have it happen again, or at least an ethical hunter does. And that's what you could be portraying in your program is, yes, they feel horrible when that happens. My husband has done it, and it eats at him. It just kills him,
And that's what people don't understand.
Yes,
it does. I have sleepless nights over that stuff.
Exactly.
Especially if, God forbid, you wound an animal and you don't recover it immediately. You do not sleep as a hunter. You stay up until that animal is recovered.
Exactly. And that's, as long as you're portraying that whole part of things, I think it's good for people to see that. I think it's people, I hate when shows just all it is they make it look so easy. You go out there and shoot. My gosh, they don't know how many, you're bouncing around a vehicle and for 8-9 hours a day in the heat with tsetse flies and all those other mopine flies and all. I mean, they just don't know what's all involved. So it's good when you can show the work and effort and time that go into it.
Paul got to hunt in snow in South Africa this year.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd like that.
That was fun. But all right, so here's the thing, and we go down these rabbit holes during our podcast if we can get off script in a hurry, but it's okay. So let's circle back around because there's something I did want to ask, and it goes back to the book. I think I know the answer, but was there a particular a personal encounter with wildlife that stood out to you particularly that was significant or transformative?
Yeah, sends a game scout with every hunting party to make sure it's legal and ethical and they document everything. Anyway, she's the one that told me about honey poaching and bushmeat poaching and wood poaching and all these other kind of poachings that we never even think about that is equally as devastating, if not more so, because it's destroying habitat and it's destroying all these other things. So and then she's also the first one who told me about why it's so important to have a value on carnivores, because, my husband was there to hunt a leopard. So that was one of the things I really questioned aside from the zebra. I didn't want him killing a zebra. So anyway, so she explained to me just how important it was because, people don't want to live with those in their backyard. So that to me, that dialogue that was opened by finding those elephant bones that didn't have any tusks, so they were probably poached. It had happened off season when the hunting concession, hunters weren't there. And but anyway, yeah. So that to me was probably.
Yeah, I think all of us at some point in our life has had that aha moment, right, where something kind of just clicked. And I know for me, I'll just share this quickly. Several years ago now, I got to hunt Namibia for the first time, and we caught a poacher. Our PH and our trackers caught a poacher, and we started backtracking and finding all the snares and the crude devices that they were using to harvest these animals illegally. And, it's one thing to see it on TV or hear somebody talk about it. It's entirely another and there was a serval in one of the traps, which was kind of this steel plate that was on the ground that they punch holes in. So when their foot goes through, there's spikes on the other end, so they can't pull it back out. So they're just kind of there. And to see that firsthand was just that was kind of my aha moment. Where it's one thing to talk the talk, right? But you got to walk the walk. And I think that for me was that there's something that definitely needs to be done and poaching taken seriously, and that's. We really need to focus on conservation, and there's a different way to do it. Now, I understand why the outfitters and the PHs get so angry with poachers because it's what they do. I get it, feeding your family. I honestly do. But you think hunters are bad? These poachers are as barbaric as you could ever think. It's horrible to see them. And you've seen the pictures before and after of rhino poachers and elephant poachers and what they leave, and they kill the calves and they kill the females with no horns just so they don't have to deal with them while they're cutting another. I mean, that's just, they don't care. And, that's not hunting at all. And
a lot of the meat goes, even bushmeat poaching, a lot of it goes to waste because if you don't get back to that animal right away, it's just waste. You've killed an animal that could be, like I said, they're not an old male like most hunters target. It could be a female, a young, or whatever. It's indiscriminate, and then it goes to waste on top of that. So it's like, oh, it's heartrending, and like the whole rhino situation, that itself, that's a whole, oh my goodness, that's just horrible what goes on there, and they don't want to waste a bullet. So a lot of times they chop it out of their face, or they don't want the sound of a bullet. So while the animal's still alive, they hack the horn off of them. It's just terrific.
Yeah, we had Randy Vestrot on last week from Choice Africa Safaris, and he's got a resident rhino population on his farms, and he had a different view on poaching and especially conservation of rhinos that I hadn't really heard before. I think you might have commented on one of the shorts he did or something, but it was interesting his take on it, in that if you focus more on these green hunts, and if you can get the South African government to say, hey, as part of a green hunt, you can cut the rhino horn off because it's going to grow back. If you flood the market or take away the demand, there's no reason to poach rhinos anymore because it's out there on the market. Will the South African government ever do that? Probably not. They're so anti-rhino everything that they'll probably not do that.
Well, and quite honestly, there's a lot of people making money off of the rhino extinction. So I hate to say that, and I'm not talking about a particular government or anything, but there's organizations and people in general who they make a lot of money from pushing that narrative, and by them being threatened, and so it's
or being paid to turn a blind eye.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I just saw a graph today actually about, I think it was in 2000. I don't quote me on the year, but whenever they stopped the allowing trade of rhino horn, and the rhino poaching just went up. It was just unbelievable, the chart that since it was banned, because there's and these poor game farmers, they're having rhinos on their property and they have no way of paying for it. I mean, it is so expensive to keep rhinos, and over 50% of our rhino population are on private farms. So they're being expected to have armed guards 24 hours and protect these things and keep them alive, but they're not allowed to be given any value. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
That was one of Randy's big things, and the government, especially in South Africa, they look at a rhino and they think, well, that's their rhino. And Randy's thing was, well, okay, I'm feeding these things 80 tons of alfalfa a week. Why don't you come and drop off alfalfa for me to feed your rhinos then?
And pay the anti-poaching guys and all the 24-hour surveillance that you have to have if you have a rhino. I mean, most game farmers can't afford to have a rhino anymore. I mean, a lot of them are selling them or giving them, getting rid of them because they just can't afford to keep them.
Well, and we talked to Sarah Forsyth a few weeks ago, and one of the things that she brought up is she's big, and she really loves going to the game auctions, private game auctions. And one thing that we took away from that she was kind of disgusted with is the fact, because of legislation in South Africa and specifically the rhino has no value anymore. So when rhinos come up on auction, it's not like they're not even being sold, much less bid on, because nobody can afford to take care of those rhinos because they have no value.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's so sad. And again, that's one of those things when you just hear, oh, it sounds so simple. Yeah, we'll stop the trade of rhino horn. But everything is so complex. You have to get into it. And once you start explaining that to people, they go, "Oh, I never thought about that. I never thought about how much money it's costing people to protect them. I never thought about the fact that you could sell rhino horn without killing the rhino. I mean, that's what's crazy to me is we could sell. I think might have been even on your show. They were talking about selling the wool off a sheep, but you can't sell the rhino horn off of a rhino. I mean, it's crazy when you really think of it. But
yeah, Randy ticked off his neighbors when he proposed that if he's got to kill his rhino to be able to make any money, then they should have to kill their sheep and cattle, the dairy cows and the sheep every time that they can make money. But that was a unique, and he's not wrong. But all right, so circling back around, so we've talked about the book a little bit. So are there you working on any new projects? Got any books in the works? Anything you can share with us that's not totally top secret?
No, it's not top secret. I want to write another book. I just haven't started one yet. I have like 3 books in my head now because I have Namibia, Mozambique, and now this South Africa, Zimbabwe thing. And every nation, every African country is so different, and the experiences are so different, and conservation's a little different. So I really want to share those stories as well, but I just haven't. It's hard. Writing is hard, and the whole process, because I self-publish, so because let's face it, I'm a woman, non-hunter, writing a book about hunting in Africa. There's not like a lot of publishers lined up to sign me up,
beating down the door to
yeah. So I had to figure out the self-publishing thing, and luckily I did it. It took me a long time, and it was really hard. And another book would now be much easier because I've made all those mistakes. And I mean, I'm not saying I want to make more. I'm sure I will. But anyway, yeah, I just haven't. I also like living life, and I like adventure. I like doing things. And when I get into a book, I am like I'm one of those like obsessed. So once I start writing, I'll be writing, like my husband will cringe if he hears I'm going to write another book, because he felt like he didn't have me for 2 years, or 3 years, because I just get so into it. I'm in Africa. Like when I'm writing a book, I'm in Africa. I'm living that. And then somebody comes in and interrupts me, and it breaks my train of thought, and it pulls me back into Idaho, and it's hard to anyway, it's just kind of, so I just haven't started another one, but I do want to, because I have so much more, I think, that I can share with people and stuff. So I'm working on it.
Nice. Yeah, I totally get that. I get that way with editing, especially. You look at our content from years ago when we first started, and now I cringe, and we actually talked about this the other night, some of the stuff we released several years ago to what we're producing now. I've kind of got now where the shot, right? So, these we're filming hunts, but the shot and the kill is least important to me. The important part is telling a story and keeping a narrative that everybody can enjoy and keep the viewer engaged. And for me, if I can't, so it takes me forever now, right? So I'm never happy with everything, and I'll cut it 15 times and recut it. And I'm mad because there's some B-roll that I should have shot while I was there. For example, I hunted a giraffe last year for my first time. I've always kind of wanted to hunt a giraffe, but for me, there needed to be a reason behind it, right? I just didn't want to go out just to hunt a giraffe. So a friend of ours at Matola Safaris, also in the Eastern Cape, had a bull giraffe that was the original bull giraffe that got brought in when they seeded the farm initially. And this giraffe is 20 plus years old, I think 26, 27, something like that. And he needed to go. The younger males couldn't compete to breed, and they're starting to inbreed now because of this bull, amongst other reasons. And so we shot the video knowing that it was it's kind of a controversial topic, right? And that we're probably not going to appeal. In fact, I feared we get hate mail and death threats and everything else from it too. But we took the approach that, hey, let's show what overpopulation of these animals can do. So we spent a lot of time with a drone, and we interviewed the farm owners and the managers, and we talked about the overbrowsing, and then we showed it to them with drone footage and kind of explained the process. And we brought in the abattoir, and we talked about where the meat was going to go and how it was going to be processed. So out of a 45-minute video, right, there's, I don't know, 2 minutes of an actual hunt on this giraffe video, and the entirety of it is centered around conservation and what it means. Sometimes you have to take animals out of a herd, and that's part of conservation as well. But that goes back to conserving the land, not the animal at that point in time. If you've got animals that are over, it's similar to the overpopulation with elephants in certain areas, right? They're tearing down the trees, and there's no treetop canopy, and then on and on and on. So I took a different approach to that. But when I cut it, I had to recut it and then recut it. And then when I finally thought I was happy with it, I put it out there, and I just knew, I was just waiting by the comment tab, because I knew as soon as this thing went out, we were just going to get, we're just going to get destroyed. We got a couple of negative comments, but I would say 90% of them were good and positive. Hey, that I didn't really realize that was a thing, and you guys did a really good job with that. And it's not one of our most watched videos, because frankly, hunters probably don't want to listen to us talk about conservation of a giraffe for an hour episode or 45 minutes. But for me, it was one of the ones that I was happiest with, because I feel like we did justice to the animal, and we told a story that needed to be told.
I think that's so important, is telling the story. A lot of hunters and hunting organizations want to lead with the facts, and facts are important, but facts don't resonate with non-hunters. But stories do. When you show them that canopy and how, too many animals is destroying the wildlife or the habitat for other species, when you show that stuff, most people, it clicks, it makes sense. But just throwing out facts and figures, it just doesn't touch people's hearts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of I think that's kind of what drives us too. Like I said, we don't shy away from conversational or anything controversial, and I want to try to educate people as much as I can from my experiences. And I'm certainly not the expert in the field by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like if I can open that door to people that would potentially not otherwise have access to Africa, or not, if they can see it through our eyes the way we see it and kind of feel just for a second what we feel, then once they started going, it's cyclical in that, once they go, then they'll bring somebody else the next time, and then they'll get a group together. And I want them to see it and enjoy it before, if things don't change, I don't know how many more years we're going to be able to hunt. Yeah.
That's what terrifies me. And then I worry about the people and the wildlife. If you don't have hunting as part of the conservation equation, what happens to all that habitat? It's just terrifying to see. To think about, and yeah, it really worries me. And that's why we fight so hard. And sometimes, like I said, I get really overwhelmed because I do post on social media every day. I try to do that, even though I'm not writing a book. I try to do educational posts. And, you were talking about how this giraffe thing took you, an hour or whatever. I made Rick's croc hunt in Mozambique last like a month on social media. Those poor people had to wait a month because it took us a long time to get it. And there's just so much involved. And, in little bits and pieces, they had to learn about it. But it kept that going, But that's what hunting is. It isn't over in just a second. And there's way more to it. Like you said, there's a reason for hunting that old giraffe that's, inbreeding now and everything. But anyway, yeah, so I try to, I lost my train of thought again. But anyway, I try to post and I do worry about what's going to happen. What's going to happen if things don't change, if we don't reach people. That's what I started to say. That's what keeps me going is I'll get a comment from somebody that says, oh my gosh, I read your book and it totally changed my perception. Or I got a letter from a little girl from Zambia who was at the SCI show and she bought my book and she wrote me and thanked me for writing the book and for standing up for their people. And you get things like that, right when you're like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm spent. And then you get a comment or an email and you're like, okay, I got to keep going because it does make a difference. It is touching some people. So anyway.
Well, and I have, you and I could talk forever about this because I'm just so passionate about it and I love my time there. But one thing I kind of go back to, and I'll use Paul as an example. I was fortunate. I got to be behind the camera this year, and film for Paul while he was there, and the first trip to Africa, and we did a free range kudu hunt, and it was tough, and it was cold, and there was climbing, and it was not fun, but it was all worth it the second I got to see his face, when everything was done, and it was just such a cool experience, to be behind the camera and see that, that. I know exactly what's going through his head right then and there, right? Because I've been there, and to see other people enjoy it, I know, I don't even have to ask, you ever going to go back to Africa, Paul?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that's the cool thing about hunters in general. They get as excited when somebody else gets their animal as they do themselves. I see my brothers and the friends are literally almost more excited when somebody else gets one, especially if it's for the first time or if it's a kid or a woman. It's just that's what's cool, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what, makes our industry kind of unique, I think, is we do have, like I said, we're not all bloodthirsty killers, right? So we do care about other people and we'll share in their success. And, I'll be the first person to smack somebody on the butt and tell them a good job when they get back to camp that night, and I want to see the pictures and tell me that, tell me how it went down, what happened, what led to it. They're so excited and that's great. And I think if I can get, if our group can get more people involved, I think that may be a little part of what's wrong with the industry right now is we've lost touch with maybe that the ability to teach. In that, when I grew up as a kid, my family, they were all hunters, and it was expected that I was going to hunt, but they taught us along the way, and they showed us why and what it meant. And when we would, we'd butcher meat, after, the Thanksgiving hunt, we'd all do it at my grandmother's house, and everybody got together, and it was a big family ordeal. And I learned the trap, and I learned to fish with those guys, and I learned the importance of it. And I think maybe that's something that this next generation or a couple generations is missing. We've kind of lost touch with that. And I think we need to kind of go back, and we need to, teach and get this next generation involved in hunter, at least give them an opportunity to make the decision for themselves.
I have so much respect for late onset hunters, because how tough is that? I mean, to just go into it blind, basically, where like you had a family, and like my brothers all had my dad. I mean, it's part of the culture. But if it's not, I just give them so much credit, because it takes a lot of work, and you got to find your people, your tribe, so to speak, to help you out and kind of guide you along the way.
Can you imagine being that guy that's always dreamed about, and I use Africa, for example, talking about that's always dreamed about hunting Africa, but doesn't really have any hunting buddies and doesn't know what to do. And I mean, can you imagine booking that first trip by yourself? How daunting a task that must be.
No, yeah, it'd be crazy trying to figure that all out.
But not even that, just the courage behind it, right? Because, most guys aren't good for asking for anything. Directions, much less how to learn. Can you teach me how to hunt, sir? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. Where women, that is, I guess, an advantage women have. I don't know, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying that, but it's easier for us to ask for help, or do, I don't have any problem going to somebody and saying, hey, how does that work? Or can you show me how to do this? I mean, I don't have, where it's a little tougher, I think, for men, especially when it comes to like something like hunting, maybe. But
I think my experience with it from that perspective has been women don't seem to be as competitive as men. So they're not afraid to ask for help. Whereas you get a group of guys together, there's no way we're asking for help doing anything, because we're supposed to know. And we're supposed to be the best at it, right?
We've determined that women are much better shots than men anyway. So there's that.
I've heard that a lot. I don't think I'd be qualified for that. I shouldn't say Rick makes me. I do practice shooting just so that I know, but it's not something I enjoy. It's not something I like, but I feel like I should know how to protect myself, and I could do it. But I definitely don't fit into that category of being one of the best shots, for sure.
Well, it's definitely, I'll definitely say Paul's correct on that. Every woman that I think we've hunted with turns out to be much better than we are, especially from a shooting perspective. They may not be as physically fit in some cases as we are. However, when it comes to getting on that rifle and listening to the pH and not overthinking it and not worrying about it and just executing, they're very, very good at doing that.
Good. That's good to hear. Interesting.
Yeah. So moving along a little bit too. So from your perspective, I'm just going to kind of jump over here a little bit. We kind of brushed over it, but how do you see the role of a modern safari outfitter? How do they contribute? What do you think their role is in contributing to wildlife conservation in the future? What's this model look like moving forward?
I think more and more the outfitters have to be involved in conservation. I mean, hunting in itself is conservation basically, because you're protecting habitat, but I think it has to be more than that. I mean, and most are doing it now, I think, but the ones that aren't, I think it all has to be this community involvement. It has to be anti-poaching. It has to be community projects. I think it all has to be all-encompassing even more and more. And, and like I said, I think that's already happening to a large degree, but I see it happening more and more where community sees benefits. And
watched there was a segment on Dylan's show, and Dylan, reach out and tell me if I'm wrong when you see this, but he was telling a story about a hunt that he did, and he had a client, and he was so worried about the hunt itself, he was missing the little things, and the client grabbed him and said, "Hey, can you come back and you talk about this tree or talk about this bird and show me what South Africa is other than just hunting." And I probably screwed that up and misquoted wrong, but it was something similar to that. So that leads into do you think we need, or as an outfitter and as a PH, we need to spend more time on those kind of things rather than focusing so much on the hunt and focusing about the fauna, the flora, and really teaching people, using it as a teaching experience versus just a hunt.
Definitely. And I think it's also the responsibility of the hunter to tell the outfitter or the PH, hey, I'm here for the full experience. It's not only about the hunt for me, because I have been fortunate. Every PH we've had has just gone above and beyond to show me a tree that, is important to this animal or that animal, or to pick up a spider and explain this spider to me and how this one is important. I mean, I've had great PHs who are just great about that. And it's partly because they know I'm interested in it all. I'm not there I go along with Rick for the hunt, but I'm there for the entire experience. So I want to learn everything I can. And of course, sometimes when you're on a stalk or something, you can't stop and talk about this snake or whatever. But there are times when that's appropriate. And I think it's important for the hunter to say, hey, I want to learn this stuff. I want to have a vine cut and be able to drink water out of this vine. To those little things that PHs, they know everything. These PHs are so smart. And the trackers. Oh my gosh, the trackers, as you know, are amazing. But they have all this knowledge that they can share with us, and they don't have to overwhelm us with too much, but just a little facts here and there and the whole story. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's a big part of the equation myself.
Yeah, so I guess my take on that, and Paul, I'll ask you, since actually this is probably a pretty good question for Paul. So, you just came back from your first trip not long ago. You're only a few months removed. So, from that perspective, do you think that outfitters and PHs alike should spend more time on the teaching aspect of it and the whole experience rather than just the hunt?
Right. Yeah. And like you mentioned, you need to talk to your PH ahead of time, right? Because they're, they only know what you want them to know, kind of a thing. So yeah. And then like you said, you want the full, go in and say, hey, I want the full experience, the stalking, what's some tips for stalking? What are some, what does that tree do? So one of my, guilty pleasures is watching Naked and Afraid. So they're doing Africa a lot. So, hey, that's that tree from there. What does that bring into it? And, just an overall experience of, hey, why do you hunt it this way? Why do you track it this way? Like I said, what is a sniffing? I was talking about how the effects of the zebra and what was the hartebeest that work together and why they work together. That whole experience. So yeah, it can be just a knowledge, but again, and it must boil down to speak to your PH and say, yeah, I do want this. I want the whole experience and not just the hunt. And
just ask, like, what are you looking for when you look at this track? What is it that you're really looking for? Is it and it's just interesting things. They're seeing things that we aren't even seeing, and we're not going to know what they're seeing if we don't ask or know, or they don't know we want to know. So I think that's really important to. And I do feel for the outfitters and PHs, because I know there's this amount of pressure on them to get the animals that people were on their wish list. So
where I was going next with that.
Yeah, so that is a big thing. And that's why I think it's important for the hunter to say, listen, I am after these animals. I would love to get this animal, but it is more than that, so. But yeah, they do feel a lot of pressure because it's a business. If people go home and they, of course, hunting's hunting, so you're not always going to get what you go after. And most good hunters know that. But still, like Rick really wanted a kudu in Tanzania. He didn't get it, but we tried hard, and he didn't hold anything against the, you know what I mean? We respected him more because we had to pass on that kudu because it wasn't big enough. So I don't know, but a lot of pressure, but I think it's and it's all about future jobs, people hiring them again. Because now there's a lot of this freelancing stuff going on, and it's a tough world for PHs.
Well, and there's, I think, inevitably, as a PH, you have an obligation to the outfitter to make him money, right? To keep the clients happy and make money. And how do you do that? And that's by checking the boxes from a hunter's list. And I think a little that gets missed. But from an outfitter's perspective, don't spend all the time teaching them all this stuff. Let's get their list knocked off, and then can we upsell them on another animal? Can we do this? So it's like the social media thing. It's also a double-edged sword for a PH, and how much that's viable towards the betterment of the outfitter and his business and the brand, or towards future client development. My thing that I've always preached to people is, if your PH is working his butt off and your trackers and your skinners are working their butt off, I don't feel like the amount of animals that, with the exception of if you're just stacking stuff off like cordwood, I don't think the amount of animals you take on a safari should have any bearing on the tip that you leave. I think it should be based on service and not number of animals. So a lot of times I feel like these PHs are really trying to make sure their clients got, checked all the lists, got the entire list of animals, everything's done, because of that, potential tip at the end. I think if you take that out of the equation where people understand, hey, I'm going to tip for service regardless, then maybe that kind of takes the monkey off their back a little bit. And then you got to figure out how to deal with the outfitter after that, who's trying to get and listen, I get it. Those operations are expensive to run. They are not cheap.
Yeah, they are. And then part of the, like you said, part of the fees from the animals do help pay for all that. So yeah, there is the second side to that. Like I said, there's always two sides to a story. There's always more than one side.
Well, and like you alluded to in your book, and I had the same effect when I, first met my PH and my trackers, and, they're carrying my luggage and they're doing, hey, what time do you want breakfast? How do you like your eggs? And I'm not that person, right? I'm like, I'll get it. I'll take care of it. So, all that behind the scenes work that they really go into, they get it full to make sure that your eggs are ready. You're going, everything is absolutely, and I'm like kind of a low maintenance guy, and I can't stand it when people are waiting on me. So it took me a couple of days to actually get them that, okay, if I say, no, don't do that for me, then they get upset. So you're like, okay, well, let me back up. And, so if you understand that side of it as well, as it's not just the hunt itself, it is that overall experience. It is, hey, I like my bacon well cooked. I like my coffee extra black, and then next thing you know, it's right there. And the extra blanket you were mentioning in your book, it's just those little things that you really have to understand as a hunter to appreciate that as part of it, as well as I think is that service side.
Yeah, it's hard when you first go over there, when you're used to hunting here and doing everything, in yourself and in the backcountry and all that. And then all of a sudden you have people catering to you like that. It's definitely an adjustment, but anyway, but it's important to them. So they want to, they and it's jobs. So like, I don't know, I've talked about in a book, but when I've found out, this was another aha moment for me in Simba camp when we were in Tanzania. We were doing like a little camp tour type thing. And then Joel was telling me that they were tearing camp after we were the last hunters there for the season. So they were going to tear camp down. And I was just devastated. Oh my gosh, this was already like my home. I had already like adopted this place as my home, and you're going to tear this down and everything. But then he explained to me just how it was a good thing, because they'd have to rebuild it. It would take a lot of villagers a lot of time to rebuild it, and they had to reopen the roads after the rainy season, and that cost a lot of people, gave a lot of people jobs. I mean, it's just that whole trickle down thing effect that we talked about earlier. But anyway.
So I'll throw this next one out. So you very much had a firsthand view of the interconnection between hunting and tourism. We kind of broached on it to begin with. So with more countries, and I'll even go from a state level too now, pushing ecotourism as an alternative to hunting, how do you think the future of wildlife conservation looks if hunting is diminished or phased out as a tool for us to use for wildlife management?
Like I said, it scares me to death, because the truth of the matter is photo tourists do not want to go to a lot of the places that hunters do. So I don't know how that habitat is going to be valuable without hunting. So I think it's up to I just wish we could get away from this whole competition thing and work together. And guides from photo tourism and stuff explain to them, because a lot of people that go on those things are, and like this woman that I was in the book club with last night, she's going to Africa in January. Luckily, she's going now after reading my book and with a whole different concept. But she would have been going as an anti-hunter and going to Serengeti and those places and a lot of them portray hunting as bad, even these ecotourism places. And it's all part of it. And here's the thing that I learned in South Africa, which it's kind of maddening to me, but a lot of these parks and a lot of these wildlife viewing game farms, they don't talk about hunting. They don't mention hunting, and they keep it out there, but they still utilize hunting in a way. Because what do you think happens to their excess animals? There's only so many animals can live in a park or on a game farm. So
they get cold.
Yeah. Not even, or they get sold to hunters and then they're hunted. I mean, but yeah, either called or they're sold to game farms that do have hunting. So it's like they're still utilizing hunting as part of the conservation equation, but they just won't talk about it. And I think that's doing a huge disservice. I think we really need to talk about how that is part of the conservation story. That is part of a big piece of the puzzle, and they work together, and it doesn't need to be exclusive. So, but yeah, I worry if these anti-hunting organizations keep getting their hold in, and we don't get the word out there in the right way. Yeah, I worry about the future here and there, about what happens to all this habitat.
Yeah, well, and I think you've got a unique perspective in that. I think you very much believe there can be there can be a sustainable middle ground between ecotourism and hunting conservation, and that they can work together. My worry is that maybe we're heading towards a greater divide in the industry, and is there a way of coming back from this, or are we too far down that rabbit hole already?
Yeah, I don't know. I just hope. I know, like Haley, the girl that invited me over there, Haley Dahl, she runs Africa Eco Ventures, and she, even though she books eco tours and that type of thing, it's all about sustainability and conservation and community mindedness. And she always gets people off we went to places where all day long we saw 8 other vehicles in a driving park. It's nothing like the Serengeti. She knows where to go to have wonderful experiences, but not be with that crowd like you see sometimes in social media. But she also makes sure people understands part of her part is talking about hunting as conservation. And she used to, I don't want to call her an anti-hunter, but she didn't used to understand hunting either. But as she got more involved in conservation, and she was one of those people who wanted to learn. So she actually went to game farms in South Africa. She actually learned from the hunters. She actually got to be friends with these people and came to understand how important hunting was. So now when she does trips for people and itinerary, she makes sure they know how hunting is a part of that. I just wish we could have more like that, working together. I don't know if it'll happen, but I wish that there was more of that to explain that.
Well, and unfortunately, if we're not able to use hunting, like we talked about before, these farmers are going to tear down the fences. They're going to cull everything, and they're going to go back to farming cattle and sheep. And I don't know how to get that across to people, like to make them understand that, hey, if you want to continue to see this wildlife flourish, then it's very much necessary, because if there's no value to these animals, say the ecotourism, then this ship is going to sail, and it's going to sail quickly. If you look at it from a dollars and cents perspective, and like I said, I don't fault ecotourism at all. I think it's a great thing, and I encourage people to enjoy it. I've done it in several other countries too. I've done it in Africa before, and I've had a great time doing it. But from a monetary perspective, if you look at the dollars spent that go back into conservation from an ecotourism perspective versus a hunting perspective, it's very lopsided towards hunting.
Very lopsided. And here's the other thing. I don't have a problem with ecotourism and general tourism, but don't act like holier than thou because that's what you're doing. I mean, like me, I just spent 2 weeks doing that kind of stuff. But we were at a different lodge every couple nights. That means they had to change the sheets. They had swimming pools. It was really cushy. It was really exciting for me because I hadn't lived that part of Africa before. But I didn't go in there thinking I was better than a hunter, because I know how much more hunting actually contributes per person, and the footprint is so much less. But I also recognize that both parts are important. But yeah, that's what I try to convey to people is, yeah, tourism and general tourism is good, but don't go in there thinking that you are, like I said, don't go in there thinking you're holier than thou, because you're still using resources. You're still having a footprint on the land. Nothing is non-consumptive. They like to call it non-consumptive. Nothing is non-consumptive. You have to have hotels and pools and laundry, all that stuff for all these people. And they want so much more. I mean, it was nice having a pool to jump into in the afternoon when it was cool, when it was hot. But anyway. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. And like I said, here's how I explain it to people. I put it in their own backyard. So like I say to people, okay, because I live on the edge of the prairie overlooking the Salmon River Canyon. And so there's wheat fields on this side of me and then River Canyon on the other. I say, okay, you have all these wheat fields here. Now, if I could take that and I could put it back to natural habitat and sell a few mule deer hunts and make my money that way without doing really a lot of work. I mean, I'm not saying it's not work, but I'm not putting pesticides on the land. I'm not having to plow. I'm not having to do all these things. If you let your natural habitat and you sell a few hunts and that makes as much money as planting wheat and doing all this work and changing the habitat, then why wouldn't you do that? I mean, if you have 1,000 acres, it has to pay for itself. It has to pay the taxes. It has to feed your family. So when you relate it to that, I say some people get it more when you say, okay, say you have a couple hundred acres and you have to pay the bills. What are you going to do with that couple hundred acres? And then it kind of a light bulb goes off like, oh, well, yeah, it would be really cool if I could just leave it natural and sell a couple hunts and then all the bills are paid. So.
And like you say, you can spend tens of thousands of dollars prepping the land and using chemical and doing all this other stuff to recoup that money and then a little bit on top of it to cover the bills. Or you could do nothing or very little and sell a couple of hunts to generate, potentially more than you would have otherwise. It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and then when you save habitat, you're not only saving the habitat for that mule deer or that whitetail, you're saving the habitat for all the animals in that ecosystem, as you know, from the bugs to the birds to everything. So it's not about one animal when it's habitat. When you're saving habitat, you're saving everything in that habitat.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought us here too, brought us back stateside for a conversation for a short minute. So I'm going to ask you this one too. So recently in Colorado, we're seeing significant changes in hunting regulation, including most recently the removal of over-the-counter tags for out-of-state residents, which is a hot button topic right now, and it's pissed a lot of people off. And then there's this new proposed legislation aimed at banning the use of dogs in mountain lion hunting. So how do you think these types of legislative changes, whether in the U.S. or in Africa, impact conservation efforts and hunter participation?
I think it definitely hurts it. I mean, you can't have people who aren't qualified making decisions about hunting regulations. I mean, it has to be based on biology and science. And
she hit a home run right off the bat, Paul.
Right.
That is perfect.
100%.
I mean, I'm an emotional person too, but let's talk about something very controversial: elephant calling. That's what's happening in Namibia and Zimbabwe right now because of the drought.
Next.
Yeah. So, yes, I love elephants. I mean, I just spent 5 weeks, and I call it an elephant vacation because everywhere we were at, there was elephants, and it was just amazing. And I had these close encounters, and I actually even got chased. It was actually kind of a couple terrifying moments too, but I love elephants. But at the same time, if it's going to save habitat and save other wildlife too, and save them overall, then it has to be done. It just has. It's a necessary evil. I guess if you want to call, I don't know that I should call it an evil, but it's a necessary thing to save habitat. And in this case, culling in Namibia and Zimbabwe to help feed people. I mean, these people are suffering too because of the drought. And if you don't do that, it's going to end up going back around anyway, because you don't think those animals are going to get poached. There's going to be human-wildlife conflict. People are going to die. It's just, yeah. And it's their right. It's their right as an African nation to make their own decisions. We have no right to go in there and tell them how to run their that'd be like somebody coming here and telling us how to run our mule deer hunting. I mean, it's just not right. They have a right to make their own decisions.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I think too much of our politics has weaned towards, how South Africa implements legislation, and too much the anti-hunters have got their way with what goes on in other countries, and I think that's to their detriment. There's a meme I saw the other day that said, take hunting out of the ballot box and leave it with biologists. Don't let political officials get involved in that decision-making process. Let's let the experts that are there in the field every day. Let's listen to them and do what they're paid to do and hired to do and went to school to do. Let's let them inform us so we can make a decision rather than putting it out there, for everybody else. And because of that, that's where I was going, between the parallels between what's going on in the U.S. right now and what's already happened and has been happening for years in like Namibia and South Africa, for example. Yeah, and you talked about, and I know we're kind of jumping back and forth, but from the elephant culling perspective, I don't think people understand that it's necessary in these situations. I know our last guest explained it, pretty well, and from a habitat perspective and how destructive these animals are. You don't until you've been there and seen them on the ground when you're standing next to one or close to one, you don't understand how big these things are and how powerful they are. And I've been watching your videos like crazy. You got up close and personal a bunch of times too. But
and how dangerous they are. I mean,
yeah.
And in the spur of the moment, I mean, I didn't post about this yet, but we were in Zimbabwe and we were driving on a riverbed, and there was a bunch of elephants, and we stayed way back, and 20 of them were on one. We were waiting for them to pass because and we had here's the thing, we had gotten stuck in that riverbed earlier, so it's kind of terrifying to know, that had happened. And then you see all these elephants, and, they had passed, and we waited quite a while, and it seemed like it was safe. So we, they were all off to one side, and there was still a few left on the left, but they looked like they weren't crossing. So we finally, and it was about 300 yards, it wasn't like a small riverbed. It was like 300 yards. And we were heading down there, and one on the left all of a sudden screamed. Those nice, calm elephants on the right, it was instantaneous. Those matriarchs turned and came after us. It was terrifying. I mean, I have parts of it on video. I'm bouncing around too much, but yeah, I mean, they followed us for several hundred yards. But if we would have gotten stuck, or if anything would happen, it would have been, and just like that, they can change. I mean, and that's because they're doing what they're meant to do. We were in their territory, and if something would happen, that would have been our fault. But they're protecting their young, and as soon as one of them screamed on the left, that nice, calm herd just morphed. So that's what people have to realize, that and people are living with this. We were tracking elephant, and we were going right through the village. I mean, right past people's homes and their fires, and their crops. It was just, something we can't comprehend.
Yeah, well, but it's easy for other people, especially here stateside, to talk about it as in they're the official know-all, be-all, and on how to solve the problem where there is no problem, and that culling should be banned, and there should be a better way to do it, and we should be able to, move these animals. You don't understand. These people have no idea of what it's like to try to move an elephant.
Yeah.
Or the cost involved in doing it.
And where are you moving them to? I mean, so many areas have too many already. I mean, I'm sure there are some areas that could use them, but you better make sure you've got it planned out right. You've got the fencing. You've got they just relocated 263 elephants to, I think it's Zambia and Zimbabwe, an area there, to Kasunga National Park. And they didn't put up a fence first. It was one of these nonprofits went in and did this, and they relocated 263 elephants there. Since then, I think 19 people have lost their lives. These elephants are leaving the park, going into their fields. And these were people who had productive, they had banana plantations. They had, they were productive farmers or community. And it's just been playing havoc on them. And it's so sad to see and terrifying. And it's not fair to them, and they're not getting anything. These same organizations that relocated those elephants are not helping out, are not reimbursing people for their crops or their foods or their loved ones dying, the whole breadwinner being killed. It's really sad to see.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like I said, there's for some reason, especially with elephants, with rhino, with giraffe, there's this emotional connection that people have, instantaneously, and it's hard for people to turn that off, right? And until you're able to do that and look at it objectively, you're not going to be able to make a decision that's informed. And here's the cruel hard truth of this is that these animals, we've interfered, right? We have disrupted their migratory patterns. We've encroached on their land. And since we've interfered, it is up to us to manage them now. And if we don't have all the tools at our disposal, we're going to fail. And, people, and I don't know how to get that across to people, that, we can't kill them. We need to do this. We need to do that. Well, first, conservation, and I'll give Randy credit because he's the one that coined this term, not me. Conservation without money is just a conversation.
Yeah. That is a good one.
Yeah. So
it takes, and that's what I always say is conservation is a luxury. I mean, these people that are living day to day in the wilds of Africa, conservation isn't on their mind. I mean, they're worried about where their meal is coming from tonight. They're worrying about how they're going to pay their school fees to get a couple of their kids into a school. I mean, in Zimbabwe, it costs $20 a month to put your kid in school. That may not sound nothing to us, but that's a huge amount for the rural people of Africa. So they're worried about that kind of stuff. Conservation is a luxury that we can enjoy, that we can talk about because we have the money to put towards it. But yeah, it's not everyone can. Yeah, like you said, it costs money. That was a good way to put it.
Yeah, well, and we go back to the wolf thing here, and we go back to the mountain lion thing here. That's going on in Colorado right now, and the wolf was introduced to several other states too. And a non-native species of wolf at that. And now you've got cattle depredation and everything else going on. And once again, we go back to these are decisions that are made not by biologists but by the ballot box and pulling on people's heartstrings. And these especially the anti-hunters. They've got big checkbooks and they do a very good job at drumming up funds for these initiatives. And they're very good at advertising and flipping the script on people, and how much legislation has been slid through over the course of history because somebody didn't read the entirety of the bill and they take it to be one thing. And in fact, it means something totally different. And, so that's happening here on the state side. So if we don't get ahead of that, as hunters and unite and say, wait a minute, we've had enough of this. We can't stand for this anymore. It's just going to be worse. And eventually we're going to be in a position where a lot of states are just saying, no, we're banning hunting. And then 10 years from now, they're going to come back and say, oh my God, what have we done? This was a disaster.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, look what's happening in Tanzania, because of Cecil the lion, that whole thing, with that whole lion import ban, that put a lot of outfitters out of business or made the concessions too expensive because they couldn't hunt lion. And it left, and I'm terrible at numbers, but it left hundreds of thousands of acres now vulnerable to human encroachment. They're no longer being watched by hunting concessions. Now they're open for resettlement and pastures and cropland. So you haven't saved lions. You've just destroyed hundreds of thousands of their habitat where they live. So you've destroyed them in that way. So.
Well, and we'll go to, I use the reference to Kenya, Kenya banned hunting. And did that help with the animal population? No, all you did is open it up for poachers. We had a guest on, Doug from Splitting Image, and he regaled us with a story about going back, and his grandparents as a kid used to take him to watch the migration through Kenya. And it, was one of the greatest spectacles that you could ever see. And 20 years later, he had the opportunity to go back, and there was a third of the wildlife there. Well, they banned hunting, so it's not hunting that's taken these animals. What's going on? Well, now the locals have taken it in their own hand. They don't want to be trampled by a lion or an elephant, or they don't want a leopard in their house or in their village. So they're taking it upon themselves, and So you've seen a significant decline in wildlife population numbers in Kenya because of not hunting and hunting being outlawed. Is that the right? I mean, that's a perfect example of, well, we probably shouldn't do this. This is a failed attempt. But still, these governments refuse to say, okay, we've learned our lesson. They just won't do it.
Well, in Kenya, the NGOs have their claws into the government so much at this. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but it's hard to change now, even though they might want to change because they've seen what's happened. It's hard to, when all that money is there from those anti-organizations, and that's their poster child, supposedly, although apparently they don't talk about the 60 to 80% of the wildlife that's been lost. And then one article I read was saying, well, the wildlife was lost, but the reason is because there's more goats and more sheep and more cattle. And I'm like, that's just the point. The wildlife's not valuable anymore, so they're replacing it with something that's going to make them money on their little plot of land. And sheep and goats and cattle and crops will do that. So they were proving their point in the article without even, of course, most people wouldn't have, maybe somebody believed it that read it. I don't know, but I just, yeah.
It's definitely a sticky situation, and it's like I said, it's one thing for these people stateside to talk about it, especially the anti-hunters. Go over there and live it is what I always say. Go to Botswana, go to Mozambique, go to these countries, go experience it for yourself, and see how people live, and go talk to the villagers that have lost their lives because of elephants and because of lions and loss of habitat from these animals, and now they're encroaching on human habitat. Go see for yourself, and then come talk to me about hunting and culling after that. And then of course they'll never do that. That's a problem. But listen, so I don't want to take all of your time this afternoon, but I do have a couple more quick things I want to get to, and I'm going to open it to Paul for a second. And this is a question I've not asked anybody before. So from as someone who values storytelling in the world, how do you think a platform like ours, Salt Lake Worldwide, how can we do a better job of promoting a balanced view of hunting and conservation from your perspective? What can we do to increase our reach and reach more people with and teach them about conservation?
I think just keep kind of what you're doing, which is telling the story, telling the story behind the hunt. And it's so hard to reach. It's so hard to draw that demographic in. That's the hard part. I mean, even with my book, it's hard. I have to kind of rely on hunters to get it into non-hunters' hands. Because then they love the book. I shouldn't say, but most of the time that seems to be the case. But a hunter normally is not going to pick up my book on their own, So it has to be shared to them, or like this book club. I knew the one woman from a couple years ago. She read the book and then she suggested it to her book club. So luckily, it exposed all these women to the book but they would have never picked up the book on their own. And it's kind of the same thing with your programming. I wish I had a great answer for you. I definitely think storytelling is the thing to explain the how, why, and the whole story behind it and relate it to, because people seem to me from my book, they really seem to connect with the people. When I tell the stories of the people I met, that really resonated with people. That's what I found again last night with that group. So if you could tell their story, I think it means a lot. I think that's, I wish I had a great answer, but I don't know that I do.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that we struggle with, right? When we're trying to make decisions on what we do as moving forward as a group. Where do we spend our time, which is inevitably money. And the easy thing to do is market towards that higher end. The hunters want to watch these shows where we're going to Africa and we're hunting all these cool exotic animals, but the conservation side of it doesn't pay nearly as well as the hunting side does, right? So that's the balancing act that we have to do. These hunts are expensive, right? So we've got to go over there, but you want to do it right and tell a story. Do you go over and do you spend 7 weeks there to tell a single episode story, or do you mix in some hunting too? And can you do that with every episode? So it's tough, when you're you're kind of split between the two. You've got this, we're so passionate about the country. We're so passionate, about conservation, but at the same time, that's not keeping the lights turned on, right?
Well, yeah, and people are we're just such a society that wants instant gratification now. You know what I mean? And like you said, you have to appeal to your market. And I sometimes get frustrated because I put so much time into a post or whatever. But it might not be exciting enough and grab the attention of somebody right off the bat. So they're not going to, but those ones they're not teaching you anything. They're just grabbing somebody's attention. And then they have, this is me being, I feel being jealous, I guess. But, I see they have 50,000 followers and they're really not teaching anything or doing anything. They're just putting a few things on there. I'm like, and I spend so much time trying to educate a little bit and make it entertaining at the same time. But it's hard. It's hard doing that balance, like you said, to find something that's going to pay the bills, basically. Although, my social media is definitely not paying the bills. But yeah, in your case, yeah. So, but yeah, you want something that people are going to watch. So.
Yeah, and that goes back to that double-edged sword of social media, right? You've kind of got the good and the bad, but you're right. I see all these, we'll call them influencers for lack of a better term. There's no substance to anything they create. It so long as it's clickbaity or it's cool to watch or it's just a little jazzy, then they're going to watch it. But there's no substance there, right? And if you look at their channel or look at them, what they normally do, all the same thing, just kind of repackaged and repurposed. It's like, did you guys actually think about this? And we're the same way. You can tell a story and you can edit. And, for me, editing a 40-minute, video, for example, it could take me, 3, 4, 5 weeks to get it to where I'm comfortable, to release it. And I think we've done such a good job when we told a story and then nobody watched us.
I know. I'll put hours into a post and then there's like 200 clicks or something like, oh, but I just got to keep on going. So.
Yeah, and we're that way too. We were just real fortunate in that we had a podcast with Sarah Ripley that we did recently, and a couple weeks went by, and it was just kind of weird. I thought is entertaining and energetic as she is, that one would definitely spark off instantly, and there'd be a big following because she's got quite a big social media following, and she's super different and enjoyable, and just somebody you want to like.
And she's so fun. Yeah, I love her to death. Yeah.
So that video went 2 weeks, and it was sitting at 74 views. And then just overnight, something happened. I don't know if a couple people watched it or a couple people shared it or something, but it went from 74 views a week and a half ago to sitting at nearly 30,000 now. Just overnight. It was crazy.
Awesome.
Which is great. And that's the thing we want to, I want to try to keep that momentum with these other podcasts and keep, interesting people on here. But it's so nerve-wracking, right? I want it to do so well, and then it sits there and I'm like, oh my God, this bombed. Did she spend her time with us? And I really hoped it would do well. And I was so disappointed. Then I actually had a buddy call me. He's like, hey, did you look at YouTube this morning? I'm like, well, no, why? He's like, I look at it every day. You need to get on there now. And I looked, and what he saw was our subscriber number jumped a bunch. Well, what I saw was that video just shot out of the gate and just started gaining huge traction. And now we went from, and that was a thing for us, we've been working on monetization on YouTube now for about 3 years. It's a tough nut to crack, but that one video alone, we went from 455 subscribers to almost 9,000 in less than a week from one video. So, Sarah, if you're watching this, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. But it makes you feel good, right? You're spending time and energy, and we're building a podcast studio and trying to get out there. And finally, somebody's watching, right? There is a group that's going to watch, and when it finally takes off, and I think Randy's will do well, and I know yours for sure will. But yeah, I could talk about this forever. So I'm gonna let Paul. I'll close out, but Paul, I'm sure you've got something over there that's on your mind that you wanna ask.
Yeah, a couple of things actually. Yeah, so, Sean likes to ask this a lot of, did you ever feel, not safe going to Africa, because that's another thing, too, that when we talk about, well, every time, and I've got much less experience than Sean does, but yeah, did you ever feel unsafe there in Africa, other than being chased by elephants?
It's kind of funny. I was just talking to somebody about this last night, actually, but it's like you have to suspend your fear, if that makes sense. You have to put your total trust. I mean, of course, you have to be smart too. You know, I have my eyes open for black mambas. I have my eyes open as much as possible, but I also put my total faith in who I'm with. And luckily, every time I've been there so far, they have made me feel that safety. You know, I never felt like they didn't have my back. I never felt like I was at risk. I always felt protected, I guess you'd like to say. But so I think you have to, yes, there's dangers there. You know, I mean, even us in that park in Tempe, you'll see my post. I mean, we had a close elephant encounter that was terrifying, but we stayed calm and everything was fine. But you just have to have faith that you can get hit in a car wreck here at home. I mean, you know what I mean? And if I died to an elephant or if I died to something like that, you know what? I died doing what I love. I love it. And I went out with my boots on, so to speak, as they'd say in secondhand lines. But so I don't know. To me, I have just been with great people that I've totally trusted. And I was even with Rick on this elephant hunt, and it was terrifying. That's a whole different thing being on the ground for that. And the head tracker, Admire, I mean, I put my life in his hands while the PH and Rick were up front, and he just said, you know, if he comes for us, you stay behind me. You better believe I was listening to him, you know. And so I just think that it's so worth it. It is scary at times. I'm not going to say it isn't, but yet I think you have to get past that and just trust who you're with.
There you go. Then I guess the second part of that is, other than obviously read your book, you got any pieces of advice you'd say for people who are thinking about going over there for the first time, whether it be an eco safari or a hunting safari? You know, any interesting touch points or any pieces of advice you'd have for them?
I first of all want people to know that it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. You can go to Africa in so many different ways. I mean, you can go hunt the big fives and pay a lot of money, or you can go hunt a few plains game animals and get the really cool experience for way less money. And it's the same for ecotourism. You can go and stay at 5-star luxury resorts, but you can also go to places that have the self-catering or they're a little bit off the beaten path, you know, and book yourself through somebody like Haley. I shout out for Haley, but she's in country. She knows these places. She knows which ones are good and bad, which ones are overrated. And I never knew that, but you don't pay your travel agent. You know what I mean? They make their money from the, especially if it's in country in Africa, because if you're booking it through somebody here in America, they're getting a cut too. And then they're still having to deal with those people over there. So there's just so many ways. Like to Haley, when she took me on this eco part thing, we went from 5-star down to self-catering, down to wild camping. So there's a whole array of ways you can do it very economically up to high dollar. So basically, just get to Africa any way you can and experience it for yourself. And if you can't, then read the book at least. And travel there that way.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my last point. Yeah, a lot of my friends are going to be getting your book for Christmas, so I want to thank you for that as well. Yeah, if they're listening, yeah, you're not the one. It's going to be the other people that get it.
All right, so then I've got one more for you, and so can you share any tips or advice for a young man or woman, aspiring writer who wants to explore topics related to hunting, wildlife, and conservation? What would you say to those people?
Oh boy. Do a little research. If you're going to write a book, do a little research first. I did everything backwards. I wrote and then researched what to do, and I kind of did a lot of things backwards. So I would do a little research first to see what the market wants, because I hate to say that, but it is also appealing to the market, which I did not do. I just wrote from my heart, and so it kind of encompasses a lot of things, but they tell you should more gear to a certain audience. So, and yeah, just start right. And there's a lot of magazines you can submit to and stuff, and self-publishing is very doable. If you have stories to tell and you have a book, I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy. And then there's still the marketing side of things. You have to get it out there or it just gets buried in Amazon. But it is doable. You don't have to have a publisher. You don't have to do that anymore. And it's very accepted anymore as long as but you want the book to look like it's been done by a publisher. It's very important to be professional, have an editor, have a good cover, all that kind of stuff. And if anybody has any, I'm certainly not an expert, but anybody still, I have my emails on my website, suetidwell.com. They're free to email me. I try to help out any kind I can, given any kind of little bit of advice or the people that I use, because I did all my research online on YouTube. That's how I learned everything. That's how I learned to how I did do all this stuff. So I can give you at least the resources I use and the people I use. So I'm happy to share whatever I do know.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we're, if you find yourself watching this video, then there's going to be a link in the description. So we'll attach all of Sue's social media accounts, any information that she wants to give out will be in the description. So click that link in the description and you can, you'll find and be able to follow Sue on all of her crazy journeys that she's on.
Sounds good. I'd love to have people follow me on social media. Give me another click. But yeah, this next, I have enough material now from being there 5 weeks. I have enough material to last me a couple months. There's so much that happens in one day in Africa that you could, it's just crazy.
That's perfect. Well, it's perfect. So as we wrap up today's episode, I just wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to Sue Tidwell for joining us and sharing your incredible insights, your passion for wildlife and conservation, and your ability to convey the complexities of hunting with conservation and everything in between. It's truly inspiring. Cries of the Savannah has clearly opened up important conversations, and we're grateful for the time you spent with us today. Paul's certainly enjoying it right now.
Yes, yeah,
hearing back
so.
to it. But and then, for those of you listening, be sure to check out Sue's book if you haven't already. It's definitely a must read for anyone passionate about the outdoors and conservation and the incredible landscapes of Africa. And with that, we'll close out this episode. So thanks again, Sue, for being here with us. And to all of our listeners, remember, live free, hunt hard, keep chasing that adventure.